Hello people, and welcome to Crypto Exposed. XRP becomes the fourth largest chain by represented tokenized RWA, beating Ethereum. Okay guys, let's get into it. Okay, so I'm sure you guys are happy to hear this, but there is a little bit of a caveat to it, but I'll get into that later. But look, let's take our victories where we can. And there's the other thing about this, like with the caveat, I've still got more to say on that anyway, so we'll get into it. But let's get into the premise of what we're talking about here then. The XRP ledger has now become the fourth largest blockchain in terms of represented tokenized RWA value, beating heavyweights Ethereum and Polygon. Notably, the XRP ledger, in brackets XRPL, now boasts 1.4 billion in represented tokenized real-world assets, having witnessed a massive 266% increase in value over the past month, the largest uptick among the top 10 blockchain networks. For context, Ethereum currently hosts 208.6 million worth of represented real-world assets, in brackets RWA, with a 30.9% decline in the last 30 days. This makes Ethereum 9th on the list of largest chains by represented RWA. Meanwhile, Polygon, which boasts a whopping 817.1 million worth of represented RWA, sits 5th, just below the XRPL. Okay, so let's just get to the caveat now. XRPL still lags in distributed RWA. However, the XRPL still lags other networks in terms of distributed RWA. With 235.7 million worth of distributed assets, the XRPL sits 10th on the list of largest networks by this metric. For perspective, Ethereum leads with a whopping 15.6 billion in distributed RWA, while BNB Chain comes second with 2.3 billion. Despite the low figures from distributed assets, the XRPL's increase in represented RWA has pushed it to 6th overall when considering all real-world assets, including represented and distributed ones. The ledger currently holds 1.7 billion in total RWA, and it remains unclear if this figure considers Luke Judge's earlier correction. Okay, so what I might hear you ask is, well, what's the difference between representative RWA and distributed RWA? I'm glad you asked. So, I've just got a bit of an AI breakdown here because that can explain it a lot better than I can, but we've got it here. Based on recent frameworks in tokenized asset classification, the primary difference between distributed RWA and represented RWA lies in their mobility, liquidity, and how they interact with the blockchain ecosystems. Distributed RWAs are designed to be moved, traded, and utilized across various wallets and decentralized applications, while represented RWAs are restricted to specific authorized platforms. Distributed RWA on-chain utility. Distributed RWA refers to tokenized assets that can be moved to, held in, and transferred between wallets outside the initial issuing platform. Key feature: high interoperability and liquidity. Use case: often designed for DeFi participation, such as using tokenized real estate as collateral in lending protocols. Benefit: enables true peer-to-peer trading and ownership. Represented RWA, in brackets platform locked. Represented RWA refers to tokenized assets that cannot be moved to external, non-custodial wallets and are restricted to the issuing platform. Key feature: high regulatory compliance and security. Use case: ideal for institutional, high value, or private equity investments where strict KYC/AML, in brackets know your customer / anti-money laundering, and whitelisting are required. Limitation: lower liquidity and reduced composability within the broader DeFi ecosystem. Okay, so now we've got that breakdown, think about it. It kind of makes sense, right? Like when we're talking about represented RWA, think about what Ripple are trying to do. Ripple are trying to work with the banks, the institutions, the governments, like that's what they want. So if you notice how it says here in the use case, idea for institutional, high value or private equity investment, yeah, that's where Ripple are aiming for. So that's completely in line with Ripple's vision for XRP, right? It was always meant to be, for banks, etc., and that kind of thing. So it does make sense that when it comes to the represented RWA, XRP is in the lead because that's what they were aiming for. That's the type of clients that they want. That's the kind of user base they want. So I actually saw that and I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense, to be completely honest with you. Now, look, when it comes to the distributed RWAs, I think at the end of the day, Ripple ideally would want to dominate in all sectors. Obviously, I think that's what any network would want. But at the end of the day, this is the thing that I will say. Okay, Ethereum's leading the charge. And look, it's possible that Ethereum will always have that lead. Who knows? We don't know. But for the people who know what Ethereum is like as a network in terms of the lagging, the scaling issues, the fluctuating fees, all this kind of stuff, it's a thing of like, you never know what the future's going to hold. Because yes, look, I'm not here to deny this at all. Ethereum is the second biggest cryptocurrency. Now, I will say this, I do think there was foul play involved in that. I do think that, they were a bit shady in terms of, we learned about ETHgate during the SEC versus Ripple lawsuit. But whatever they did, they are second now. That's just what it is, right? No matter how they got there, that's where they are. But you never know, like, as time develops and you start to see how things pan out, I think it's very possible that XRP could take over Ethereum. I really do, because I've always said this with Ethereum. Like, I've used Ethereum, so, I'm not here as like a maxi of XRP, to be honest with you, because I'm not a maxi of any crypto token. I don't just hold XRP, so I'm not a maxi by any means. But I've used Ethereum. So if I thought Ethereum was good, I would just say it's good. Because I'm not here to be a maxi. Like, I also cover HBAR content because I think HBAR is good. I like AVAX. AVAX is a good network. So I'm really not here to be like, picking on Ethereum because I'm a maxi or anything. I'm genuinely telling you, as someone who has used Ethereum, I thought it was a nightmare. I really didn't enjoy the experience. But I had to use it because that's where all the dApps were for the stuff that I was trialing out in the previous bull run. And so I think if like a lot of people start to see, when they really start testing this technology, I think they will start to see like, hey, okay, like, yes, Ethereum is the biggest platform. Okay, we get that, but is it really the most ideal platform though? Is it really the best platform to actually use from a user perspective? And I think as that starts to come more apparent, then I can see them, moving their money elsewhere to other networks. So I do think that is still open for XRP to potentially take the lead. I don't know if it will. I'm not saying it definitely will, but I think, it's still anyone's race at this point. Like, you've got to understand that this is still so early. Like, we still haven't got regulations. We're still seeing how things pan out. Like, this is still an ongoing thing. The winners haven't really, like, you've got somewhere you can say, okay, it's quite clear these are going to be winners. And I think, with Ethereum, they've done that up until this point. But I said it before, like, I liken it to like mobile phones, right? Like, back in the day, you had Nokia. Nokia was the top phone. Nokia was just ruling everything. Nokia was the top dog. Then they got knocked off. At some point you had, for example, Blackberries. Blackberries came in and Blackberries was ruling the road. Now you've got iPhones. iPhones are ruling the road. And who knows, there could be another point where iPhone gets surpassed. Some other new phone comes out and takes iPhone's place. Like, this is just how things happen, right? Like, things change. So it could be that, yes, Bitcoin and Ethereum are getting all of the praise right now as the top networks and whatnot. But, in the next 5-10 years, that could completely change. It could be that XRP is now the network that everybody talks about. Or it could be another one. I'm just trying to be honest here. You never know. But again, like, at least with XRP, you can understand how it could get there because we know how cheap it is and we know how fast it is and we know how it can scale to, 1,500 transactions per second. We know these features, which would be highly beneficial. So it makes sense, right? Like with Ethereum, I feel like the only reason why Ethereum is where it is because it's the second cryptocurrency out there. That's it. I really do believe that. Like, I think maybe there's a thing as well where, consensus that those guys are kind of, doing all that lobbying and stuff and paying for, partnerships and getting themselves into, friends in high places and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, like, I don't think anyone's really looking at Ethereum genuinely and thinking like, yeah, this is the greatest network to use. No, I just think, it had that early mover advantage. It was the second top cryptocurrency out here. And so people are just going with where the liquidity is. I really don't think it's based on the user experience because as someone who's used Ethereum compared to other networks, it's absolutely dire. So that could change. That absolutely could change. So, look, we'll take what we've got in terms of winning, in terms of represented RWA. And that to me shows you when it comes to the big institutions, the government, they're picking XRP. So that says something as well. That's very telling as well. They're picking XRP. And again, that makes sense because it is a great network to use, and that's where Ripple are trying to aim for. So not surprised to see that, but in time that could change as well. It could be that they beat, Ethereum in the distributed RWA too. So we'll have to see how things pan out. Like, I can't guarantee anything because I don't know. So, I'm not sure how it's going to work for sure, but let's see, we'll see how things go. But there's definitely that potential there. And we're already seeing now that there is one area where XRP is dominating Ethereum. So, and that shows you when you're talking about the institutional clients and that kind of thing, that's where a lot of the money is. Let's just be honest. That's where the big money is. So even if they're not winning in that aspect, the distributed RWA, like, it could still be that they're getting a lot more money because of the fact that the banks and the private institutions, etc., like the people with money, they're putting way more money and value onto the chain anyway. Do you see what I mean? So we'll see how it goes, but I think it's very telling. And yeah, I'm just going to take that victory where it is. I don't care if there's that little caveat because that could change. So, we're still winning in one area and I'll take it. Who knows? There could be plenty more areas in the future. So thought I'd share this with you because I thought it was good stuff to see. Thank you very much for watching this. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And hit that bell. Take care.